My guest this week is Katharine Birbalsingh. She is the head mistress of the Michaela Community School in London, a charter school supporting inner city kids. She was the first guest on the Charles Love Show, and we spoke a year ago about race and education, and I wanted to bring her back and talk about what has changed since we last spoke. Katharine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a year since I had you on. You were my first guest, and we did 2 hours, talked about a lot of stuff. So since it's been a year, I think the show went so well and was so well received. We solved a lot of problems. So I just brought you on so you can talk about our victories, and we can talk about all the wonderful things, look back on the things we were dealing with then that we're not dealing with anymore. And so I just start off by asking you, what has changed since our last conversation?
Well, I have to say in the US, I think things have got worse in the last year. I mean, we talked, as you say, there's race and there's education. I mean, one of the big fights in education, both in the US and over here, I'd say all over the Western world, is we're trying to argue for adult authority in the classroom, adults being in charge of the kids, setting the tone for discipline, leading the learning, as opposed to it being child-centered learning where the children are all kind of in groups looking at each other. It's the teacher who leads. And that's something that there are small pockets of teachers here and there, I think, where in the last decade or so, especially in England, things have improved a little. But I do think that the race argument in America has scuppered things somewhat. And what I mean by that is it's undermined the kind of normal the argument against child learning and child-centered learning, and the argument against a far more relaxed attitude to discipline. So I'll explain what I mean. Take your the work hard, be nice motto from KIP. KIP is a charter school that has hundreds of schools across America, has transformed the lives of Black kids in the inner cities. And their motto is one that we copied and we changed it slightly to work hard, be kind. And that's because you want every child to be able to do those two things, to be a nice person and to work hard. And since the BLM summer recently, and the campaign from BLM, KIP has essentially had to change their motto and abandon it. And the reason for that is because it's seen to be bad that you're teaching children to be nice. Because somehow that means that the white supremacist teacher is oppressing the Black child and is teaching him to be subservient, and that we're unable to distinguish between being nice and being subservient. And where that makes me really sad is that it means Black children are not getting the chance to be taught manners and to be taught sense of respect for people and a sense of the fact that they are children and that the adult is the authority in the room. And this is happening even here now. Recently, I was on a call, a teacher training institution. There were all these trainee teachers, and there were 4 people on the panel. I have to say 3 of the people were on one side and I was on the other side. One of them was meant to be somewhere in the middle, but it really was 3 against 1. And we were talking. We were all being very polite to each other. And one of them said how she was a white Irish woman, because I was saying that adults should lead the learning. And when I say lead the learning, what I mean is the teacher stands at the front of the class and is aware of the fact that she knows more than her kids. And she's got degrees and she's been teaching for years. And so she's going to know more than the 11-year-olds in her class. But the idea is, frankly, from the other side, that that's not true. And as an example, one of the women in the panel, she said, well, I'm a white teacher from Ireland. How could I possibly lead in a diverse classroom? Obviously, it is for the children to lead sometimes. And then another Black woman on the panel said, it's so wonderful to hear that, because when I was at school, none of the teachers understood my experiences. And I was thinking to myself, sorry, I don't understand. So we're learning Shakespeare. In what way is it important to be letting the Black kids in the class lead because they're Black and therefore they know more than their white teacher? Like, or we're not just teaching Shakespeare, you're teaching algebra. How is it that the Black kids in the class know more about algebra? It is really quite scary. And I think that too many teachers before BLM were uncomfortable about taking the position of authority. I think now it's even more so the case with white teachers in particular, because they feel somehow that it's a white supremacist act to take the position of authority in a classroom these days.
We're so hung up in this debate on race and here, the CRT and all that stuff. And I'm like, that's not even the primary issue. It's what you said. People of authority are saying they want the kids to lead in the classroom. They want the kids to decide what is being taught. How exactly can any logical person think that this is going to help a child?
Yes. And that is the thing that I have been fighting for decades. And what is interesting, and this is where I think those who are sort of waking up now, and I don't mean the woke, I mean the people who are small c conservatives who are now waking up to this big problem and saying, oh my goodness, I had no idea that we were in this cultural nightmare, and now I see it. I have to say that many of us have been trying to ring the alarm bells for many, many years, and nobody heard us. They didn't hear us when we were saying we're not teaching children to read properly. They didn't hear us when we were saying that proper history is being abandoned in our classrooms. And partly they didn't hear us because they didn't care as much, because they thought, well, this isn't my kid. It'll be okay. And what has happened? That's how it started. It started with conversations around, well, should the adult really be an authority? Ooh, let's do group work to make it more interesting for the kids. That's how it started. It has now ended up with, we white teachers are bad. Black children should be leading in the classroom. That is what I'm hearing. And the thing is, and that's here, let alone in America, and we're nowhere near as bad as you guys. So the thing is, people don't see how it gradually disintegrates the culture. And somehow teachers are made to feel bad for wanting to be in charge. And this has been happening not just in the last few years, and not just because of BLM. It's been happening since the 1960s. And it's been gradual. It's a worry, because what then ends up happening is that people have a discussion and get very angry about critical race theory. And they don't even really know what they're talking about. They just know critical race theory is bad or critical race theory is good. And then they just are arguing about this thing that people don't necessarily understand. And they don't understand where it's rooted. It's rooted in an understanding that the adult is not the authority in the classroom. And then it's all about the confidence that the adult has to be that authority. And if you're constantly told as a white person that you aren't really a kind of whole human being because you don't understand what it is to be Black, then somehow that takes away from your ability to be able to teach algebra. And I mean, in this discussion I was having, I said to them, look, because they were saying, people have made all sorts of suggestions that I must hate children, that I get a kick out of putting them in detention, that's why I like to be strict with the kids. Why am I strict with the kids? Because I want to have the highest possible standards for them, in particular the disadvantaged brown and Black kids that I work with in the inner city and have done so for over 20 years, transforming their lives for the better. And you do that by keeping your standards high. And you said a moment ago, well, wait a minute, how does anybody think that teaching children Black math or whatever it is, how are they going to actually improve? And I don't think anybody's actually thinking about this stuff. I think that in the moment, if you're white and privileged, you feel very uncomfortable about using that white privileged position, and they feel that it's to kind of dominate them. And I mean, you are dominating them to a certain extent, because you're saying, all eyes on me. Come on, everybody, sitting up straight. Da-da-da. Right, let's go. Pens in hand. That's what you're asking them to do. And if you're uncomfortable with doing that because somehow that makes you feel like a white supremacist, then who loses out? The kids in front of you who don't get to learn. And then if you say things like, well, we don't want to teach them to be nice because that's somehow to be a white supremacist, kids then aren't nice to each other, funnily enough, because they're not. If you don't teach children to be nice, then they won't be nice. And that also is needs an understanding of kind of original sin. And we run a secular school here, so I'm not even, I'm not a Christian. But I do very much believe in the concept of original sin. And what I mean by that is a child will not know right from wrong unless you teach that to him. Unfortunately, the progressives sort of think that this is just natural, that children will all be good if you just let them express themselves. And I think quite the opposite.
Coming up, more with Katharine Birbalsingh, headmistress of the Michaela Community School in London. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
We return to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer. Once again, here's Charles Love.
Are you tired of summer nights in May?
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Katharine Birbalsingh, headmistress of the Michaela Community School in London. And earlier she mentioned that we didn't get here overnight and it had been a gradual shift. But I argue here that it is no longer gradual. It has grown exponentially to the crazy level of focus on race and white teachers thinking they can't teach Black kids and are afraid to do their job.
No, you're right. I mean, it does seem to be spinning out of control. Although I often do think to myself, if it's got this far in the last 4 or 5 years, what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years? I am bracing myself, although I have only to look at America to see where we're going to end up.
Yeah, we're always 18 months to 2 years ahead of you.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I just kind of want to appeal to white people and say, please just get rid of the guilt. Because if you don't feel so bad, then you'll be able to stand up for the things that you already think. Because I know there's loads of them on Twitter and so on, people that cannot speak out and are behind anonymous accounts who are just normal, who are wondering what on earth is going on with the world at the moment. And, sometimes men who can't tell their wives, for instance, how they think, women who I've spoken to saying, thank goodness you're saying something. I can't tell my friends. I can't speak out. My own staff, I have to do all sorts of kind of sessions with them to support them through having got a job here because they lose friends for having come to work at this school. What is it that we do at this school? We have really high standards of behavior. We expect that kids should do what the teachers say. Even saying that out loud here, do what the teachers say. I think to myself, oh my goodness, somebody's going to get me for saying that, What do we expect? We teach them dead white men. That is something that people find very problematic. We sort of believe in the best that's been thought and said. Notice how I say sort of, because I'm feeling awkward about it, because I know somebody's going to get me for it. And, the fact is that it's okay to believe that Shakespeare is better than me, for instance. I'm an author. I've written stuff. I think Shakespeare should be taught over and above my own books in school, right? And you know why? Because Shakespeare has been influencing literature for 400 years. And if in 400 years my books are influencing literature, then by all means, teach me as part of the curriculum. The fact is that this idea that we should teach me because I'm Black, whereas we shouldn't teach Shakespeare because he's white, is just mad. The other thing that's mad is thinking that white kids somehow can access Shakespeare more readily than Black kids because color somehow allows you to understand Elizabethan language. I mean, the fact is that Shakespeare is impossible for all kids. And what you need is a teacher who's really knowledgeable about it, leading the learning from the front of the classroom, explaining the stuff to the kids so that they can understand it and get excited about it. And they can access the universal values and truths that Shakespeare gives to us, which anybody of any color, of any type, can access. And we are so used to seeing the world through this lens of identity politics, we've forgotten what it is to be human, which of course is what Shakespeare is doing. He's talking about being human and jealousy and rage and anger and love and fear and all these kinds of human emotions that he wrote about 400 years ago and has been influencing literature for 400 years. And I mean, in this conversation I was having with this teacher training institution, I thought, okay, you know what? I didn't even go to dead white men, right? I wasn't going there because I knew that they would all freak out. So all I said was, well, let's take maths, for instance. Maths is something that we can all agree on. 2 + 2 is 4. But as you said, in America, it's even got to the point where when you say Black math, what you're referring to is, and I think it's exceptional. I don't think it's the norm yet in America. I think
But go ahead.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say was, I suppose anything, it's like when people say, you sometimes see them online, those sheets that say things like stuff that's considered white. Being on time is white. Right. Sitting up straight is white. So expecting children to be on time and sit up straight, you're oppressing them with white supremacy. It's the same thing with the math. 2 + 2 is 4 in a white supremacist classroom, but elsewhere you can make it whatever you like. It is undermining to children to do that, because that means all the black kids leave school not being able to sit up straight, not being polite to people, not being on time. They don't know much math. They can't really read. They don't know much about Shakespeare. In what way is this helping kids to make it in life? What it does help, and this is an important point, which is that if you feel really guilty as a white person, in order to alleviate that guilt, well, how great is it to be in the classroom and let the kids do the leading of the learning, so that you can go to a dinner party in the evening and say, I know I'm a terrible white person, but it's okay because I'm good, because I allow the black kids in class to lead. And so what that's really about is not empowering the children. It's about empowering yourself. And it's about letting yourself off the hook. And it's about alleviating your guilt. And that is very selfish. And it means that you're not holding the line for those kids. You're not supporting them in being the best of them that they can be. Now, I also have some sympathy for these white teachers, because if their parents are coming into school saying, why are you teaching my kid about Shakespeare? It's very hard as a white teacher to push back on that and say, well, he's been influencing literature for 400 years. How do you do that? And that's the difficulty, I think, that we all find ourselves in. It's very hard to get ourselves out of the current cultural nightmare.
The other thing, I think that we are moving to a place where we're not putting the kids first. So in those scenarios where you're talking about with the math, what also happens is we keep talking, there's also an equity push outside of the schools. We want more black people on the board of directors. We need more managers. We need more engineers. Well, how are we going to have more black engineers? You don't want those kids building buildings, the ones that you put through school and told them 2 + 2 was 5. So you're setting them up to not do the core STEM courses in college. So how can they, 15 years from now, have a larger percentage of blacks in certain positions? But of course they've got
sewn up the argument, because then when those kids don't get the jobs, they say that's racism. And so you really can't win. And then what ends up happening is that there are some people put in positions of authority later on in life who shouldn't be in those positions of authority. And if some people are so convinced that they are oppressed, recently I saw on Twitter some guy, an American, Black American, who had got a woman fired for saying in your hood, go back to your hood.
Right.
And I thought, okay, I mean, is she saying that because he's black? I don't know. Is that just a phrase that people use? Obviously, they were angry with each other. Even if she was saying it to him because he was black, is that reason to get somebody fired? I mean, so she's not a nice woman. Avoid her. I mean, you don't have to have dinner with her. Maybe she's a bit of a racist. Fine. I mean, I don't know. And what was interesting was that he was really proud of the fact.
Yes, he made a video.
Exactly. And was explaining to the world how he'd managed to do this thing. And the only reason why I so happened to see this, so then I looked on his Twitter feed and I saw another video of his and some other tweets about a book he had written. And everything in his tweets was all about, it's really hard. Nobody's going to buy my book because it's black and I'm black. So everybody hates me because I'm black. So please, people, support me and buy my book because the racism is stopping my book from selling. And I just thought, I suppose you see the world through that lens all the time, where you're convinced that everybody is racist against you, that the reason your book isn't selling as much as you'd like it to is because of racism, that you need to go out as a kind of vigilante and get everyone fired who says anything that you think might be racist, then he sees himself as a kind of modern day Superman, doesn't he? And he's telling the world. And then he's got a bunch of white people who are celebrating him and saying, well done you for getting rid of the evil woman. And it's like the Salem witch trials. I mean, it's really horrifying. Or the way in which, I don't know, women who might have got pregnant out of wedlock once upon a time and you sent them away, banished them out of society because you couldn't have them. It's exactly the same thing here. Mm-hmm. And people just don't see that. And the mob that's created around these issues where everyone goes after them. So, to just in defense of those white teachers, I kind of get it. I get why they're doing what they're doing. But the children who it's failing are the Black kids in particular, and the Black kids from the inner city. They don't stand a chance nowadays. And it's just heartbreaking because my whole career, my whole life is about working in the inner city and changing the lives of these children for the better. And these days, I have to say, the fight is bigger than ever.
Coming up, more with Katharine Birbalsingh, head mistress of the Michaela Community School in London. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Katharine Birbalsingh, head mistress of the Michaela Community School in London. We're talking about the problems with education, and before we were talking about white teachers who are either afraid or too woke to stand in front of the class as an authority and teach. But here in this segment, I mentioned another group to Katharine that I believe is much more responsible, much more dangerous in the realm of how we improve the lives of minority students. I get why one would feel sorry for these white teachers. They are up against a lot, this cancel culture. But there's another facet. There's a group I think that's actually doing more damage than these progressive whites who are feeling guilty. We have to mention the African-American elites who are like well-educated and doing well and making six-figure incomes, but they're talking about, they're like that guy. That guy you're talking about, another thing I noticed on his Twitter was that he had like 100,000 followers. He was a blue check. He lists himself a New York Times best-selling author, yet woe is me because this 20-year-old woman attacked me. So you have that. You have these people you have to follow them. It's funny if you go to their Instagram and things like that. They're like living their best lives, right? They're vacationing in Hawaii and going all over the world and everything's great and flashing pictures of their new luxury car. And then when they talk, it's woe is me, Black America is so bad. So these people are also in the schools, right? Some of them run the schools in some places. So the white liberals feeling guilty, I get that. But these Black educators think they're helping. They want, they're down for the cause and they want to help the Black man. They want to help these kids by filling them with hatred and anger instead of filling them with STEM and respect. And they know better. Even if the country is racist, giving them their argument, they found a way to be successful in that framework. So why wouldn't they pass along the secrets and the tips to be successful in spite of this racist country instead of saying you won't make it because it's so racist and then going back to their penthouse? They are part of the problem. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because this is what I say, this has been happening for years. And before it wasn't necessarily on the race front. And what I mean by that is it was this idea that the rich who went to private schools remembered their teachers at school and thought, it was a bit boring when the teacher spoke at the front. I know what we need to do. Make it more fun and interesting and turn the desks around and let's be in groups and let's teach each other. And that's a much better way to learn than listening to the teacher. When in fact, they learned by listening to the teacher. And what it is that they climb up that ladder and then they pull the ladder up after them. And it's the same thing now that's happening, but it's just around the race issue, as you're saying. These Black people who have been super successful, even if, let's say it is a really racist country, they've been successful. How were they successful? They got traditional educations, they worked hard, they were kind, and they kept on persevering. If, on the other hand, you tell a child over and over again that the establishment is against him, that he will never succeed no matter what he does because the place is too racist, he will just give up and he will find other ways of succeeding. And that's normally on the street, in gang warfare, carrying guns and knives and so on, and participating in a world that most of those people who you're talking about don't know, right? They've never known it. They've grown up in very middle-class families, well off, looked after. Mom was maybe at home. If not, mom was certainly making dinner every evening and things were nice for them. And I mean the Black people too. I don't just mean the white people. I mean those people who are flying around in their private jets and so on. And then they have the audacity to criticize those of us who have dedicated our lives to working in the inner city to change these kids' lives for the better. And I'm saying to them and to anyone who's willing to listen, please stop doing this. You're not helping us. It's like Jason Riley's book, Please Stop Helping Us. Like they're not helping us. And the thing is, I always invite people. I mean, obviously your American audience, very welcome to come over to London and visit us at school here and have lunch with the children and a tour and talk to them. And you'll think, wow, actually, this is what's possible in the inner city. And the thing is, there is great work going on in the inner city, not just with us here, but all over America. There are places where great work is being done, but those people are being undermined. I also hear from teachers on Twitter, because obviously I'm quite vocal about education, sad DMs that I get from people saying, look, I'm trying to speak out. They're forcing me to teach Kendi. And I've said I don't want to teach Kendi. And I just don't understand why that's happening in schools. Like, so you know what school's for? To learn some English and some math and some history and some geography and some science and some French and Spanish. Like, that's what you're learning. Now, every now and again, there may be some more cultural issues, but generally speaking, that's not the focus of your school day. But now that's what people think it should be. And again, it's about us losing track of what the goal of education is. And I think too many people on the left think that the point of education is to create revolutionaries, that that's their goal. And I would say, no, the goal of education is to educate people and to educate children so that they can make something of their lives. And I fully expect that some of our kids will become revolutionaries and some of them will become dentists. The fact is, we have a variety of different kids, but all of them will leave school literate and numerate. They will have a basic knowledge of history and geography and science and so on. That's the point of school. But people on the left are so obsessed with this idea of revolution that they think that that's what school's meant to do, is turn them into revolutionaries. And it really isn't. I mean, not everybody wants to be a revolutionary, and it's not for us to make them be revolutionaries. That's for them to decide.
Coming up, more with Katharine Birbalsingh, head mistress of the Michaela Community School in London. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am speaking with Katharine Birbalsingh, who runs a very successful charter school in London, the Michaela School. And in this segment, we talk about the one issue that gets her really fired up and close to the edge, the culture, but as it relates to violence, over-sexualization, and things of that nature, how it's bad developmentally and how it makes her job of helping these kids harder.
So let's just be clear about what we're talking about when we say that. So, I can't even say the words. So you want to talk about the song WAP, for instance, and I can't say what it stands for. I mean, maybe you can put it in writing or something with WAP.
Yes.
And if you watch that video, it is so awful. I mean, okay, it's awful on all sorts of fronts. I mean, on the violent front, on the sexual front, on the everything. It's just so awful. Then you've got various male artists out there. And then Cardi B obviously isn't the only female one. There's Nicki Minaj and various others. Digga D, for instance. There are various male artists who the only way in which they can sell their music is if they are extremely violent and misogynistic. And they are always misogynistic against Black women. White women are not treated badly. They're not called hoes and bitches and so on. And it's become so normalized in this Black music, nobody questions it. And the thing that really makes me angry is that these white people go around saying, I'm so guilty. I can't have opinions on race. I don't know what it's like to be Black. I'm so sorry for being white. But I tell you one thing they do have an opinion on is Black people ought to try and kill each other in music videos. Right? White people are telling me, yes, it's great that Black children are being exposed to Black women being told they're hoes and bitches. Isn't this brilliant? And I'm thinking, sorry, I thought you said you were a white person who was really uncomfortable with saying things about race. But now
I am, but I'm just showing you what's wrong with showing the Black experience. What's real? That's really, maybe Black women really are bitches and hoes, so we have to let them play their music. Who are we as white people to tell them not to explain their experience? That's their truth.
And then when I think about the racist, and I think this is where the people on the right will never understand, because their belief is there's no such thing as racism. So there's no such thing as institutionalized racism. Well, the music industry is institutionalized racism 100 times over, right? That is, you want to see institutionalized racism? Look at the music industry, because you got a whole bunch of white rich guys who are pushing out these black minstrel idiot show guys and saying, do your little dance, black boy, do your little dance, and call your women bitches and hoes, completely undermine your entire community, break up your families, ruin your lives, and then go around tell all the white people, oh, but this is our truth, this is our experience. And all the white people who don't normally like to talk about blackness will come out supporting you. And you know why? Because you're going to make those white guys rich. That is what is going on there. And look, I get it, because the fact is, this is what's so twisted about it all. As a black artist in various music realms, so obviously if you're a black classicist musician, that is not the case. You're talking about grime and drill and certain forms of rap and so on. So in some areas of music, the fact is that if you want to make it as a black artist, you have to glorify violence and glorify the degradation of black women. Because if you don't, it's very hard to succeed. And there's one or two exceptions, but even they would say very, very difficult to really make it in that world. And that's what institutionalized racism is. And yet these white people who say they're anti-racist are arguing for the proliferation of an institutionalized racist system. And they're the ones that are constantly telling us how institutionalized racism is everywhere. Yeah. And you're the ones who are supporting it. You're the ones who are pushing it in our faces and arguing with me, a black woman who works in the inner city with black kids, and I can see how it ruins their lives. And they say, how do you see it? It's not an instruction manual. Look, if you are having that kind of language being pumped in your ears 6, 7, 8 hours a day, which is what's going on, it ruins the way in which little black boy hears that. He can't look at a girl in the same way. He doesn't see her and respect her and admire her and want to get her attention because he thinks she's beautiful. And same thing if a girl hears over and over again that she's a hoe and a bitch. Same thing if you tell a child that he's dumb over and over again. He's going to believe he's dumb. You tell a girl that she's a hoe all the time, she's going to believe she's a hoe. I don't know why this isn't obvious. And I tell you, when it comes to their own children, they wouldn't be allowing them. Now, they'll allow them to listen to some black music like this because they can dabble in it. Because those white kids don't identify with the kinds of people in this music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
it's like a fantasy for them.
Exactly. And it's really, that's exactly what it is. They're going for a walk in the jungle is what they're doing. And, you know that song, you got jungle fever, I've got jungle fever. Anyway, look, that is what is going on. And that is racism. And the thing is that the very people who are anti-racist are the most racist. And it's impossible to argue it. And you know why? Because the people on the right won't back that argument. People on the right say, oh, no, there's no such thing as racism. Oh, no, institutionalized racism. That's just a nonsense from the left. It is not a nonsense. It is a very real reality. And I'm not one to say that all of the stuff that people on the left argue is complete nonsense. You know, there are all sorts of studies that have been done that show that if you send your CV off, your resume off to a job, and it has a black name, you're less likely to get shortlisted. There is an example of institutionalized racism. Now, for some reason, those on the left are quite happy to point that out as an example of institutionalized racism. But when it comes to the music industry, they will fight to the death to keep that music the way that it is. And it is so hugely offensive. But anyway, I mean, look, the fact is that I just like them to be consistent, you know, at least with the guys on the right, you know where you stand, because they just say there's no institutionalized racism and that's it. The guys on the left, however, they're extremely dishonest. And they're just saying whatever it is they need to say to back their own agenda and to push through their ideology.
Coming up, my final segment with Katharine Birbalsingh, the headmistress of the Michaela Community School in London. You are listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. I've reached my final segment with Katharine Birbalsingh, headmistress of the Michaela Community School in London. We're talking about education and the culture and race and how they all tie together, but also make the job more difficult for teachers. And here, as in many of my interviews, I ask her, what do we do? No, I only got a couple minutes with you left. Right. And I want to talk about what we need to do to kind of turn this around, at least from a school and education and teacher standpoint. And I think we need more bolder teachers. I mean, I don't know if you agree, but I'm one of those say that we actually do need more male teachers because they're fading away. But in this climate, it's kind of like being a police officer. They're so attacked and undermined. Would anybody even want to teach now? I mean, other than the people who are just passionate about it.
Yeah, that's, and I agree with you. We do need more Black teachers in the classroom, more male teachers in the classroom, of course, because role models do matter. Having said that, the most important thing is that you want good teachers in the classroom, obviously. And actually, if you ever asked, I've surveyed kids over the years that I've been teaching, and they'll always tell you the most important thing to them is the teacher is good over the race or the gender of the teacher. Having said that, in the same way as I'll bring a Black policeman in, I think it's good for the kids to have good role models. So, yeah, the problem is, like with police, I don't actually know how the U.S. police forces are managing to get new recruits. Because what you all have done to your police forces, when I say what you've done to them, how much the hatred that they have been shown by the country. And when I say the country, I know there's lots of people who like the police, but the overall feeling, at least from me abroad, looking at the US, I feel for your policemen. And I feel for the guys who are trying to hire more policemen, because I presume that they've hardly got anybody asking to be a policeman. And what you've just said is it the same thing for teaching? And, I certainly think it's getting that way. It's nowhere near as bad as the police,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But clearly, if you're constantly blaming a profession for everything, fewer people are going to want to do it. Because both of these professions don't pay very much, right? Being a policeman is actually quite dangerous. Like, if everybody's going to hate you, why would you choose to do it, And people are not thinking. I mean, of course, you've got a whole bunch of people arguing to defund the police. I mean, we've got a small number. I think you've got a larger number of people. So they actually want fewer recruits. And of course, just like with the Black kids in schools, what's going to help them? Having a traditional education. What's going to help the inner cities? Having more policemen around. Show me the Black person living in the inner city who doesn't want policemen around. I mean, they're the ones that suffer. It's only these middle-class rich people who think, wouldn't that be a great idea? Because they're living in their gated communities and none of this affects them. Right. So in terms of what can be done, look, schools need to be as traditional as possible, teaching traditional morality, teaching right from wrong, teaching basic math and English and history and geography and all of that stuff. The problem is, of course, you need to fill your schools with teachers who are able to do that and who want to do that. And we come back full circle to what we were saying before.
How we find it.
I mean, if the teachers are made to feel guilty for who they are, they'll find it very difficult to teach that stuff and to lead the learning from the front and be an authority in the classroom. That is what is key. And that is where the rot started in the 1960s. And we are where we are now because of that.
She is Katharine Birbalsingh, head mistress and founder of the Michaela School in London. Katharine, always great to speak with you.
Well, thank you for having me.